Rise and shine. Wake up with watches, caffeine, and chronometry in equal measure this morning, and I have an incredible array of hors d'oeuvres prior to your breakfast, or as an accompaniment. Of course, the obligatory wrist check for those who are absolutely new to the channel, my Zen Easy M11 already running to time the program, 43mm tegamented steel, a wonderful SZ01 radial minutes modification of a Valjoux 7750. You could see it is a lefty chronograph, and this with a bidirectional rotating mission timer bezel, one of my favorite watches of all time, and I'm proud to say the one I call my very own. Now, it is not the only Zen on the table today, but since I promised you chronometry, I'm going to deliver immediately with a chronometer, a superlative chronometer, in fact, the most charismatic dial in watches, rivaled only by the Grand Seiko Snowflake. This is the 2014 to present Rolex Milgauss Z Blue, a timepiece 40mm in stainless steel, the extravagant iridescent electric blue Z Blue dial is one of only several colors on this panoply of rainbow hues. You can see signal orange. You could see there is a green tinted crystal. This is technically the 116400 GV Z Blue, so it's part of the green crystal family. And of course you have both the lightning bolt hand, which by the way is true to the original 1950s Milgauss. This one is not postmodernist. And then you have the lovely signal orange printing on the dial, the shock below Rolex Oyster Perpetual, and of course white gold indices and hands. This is an upscale 40mm watch that offers you substantial water resistance, 100 meters, and also substantial anti-magnetic resistance. Now, while it is technically the Milgauss, so 80,000 ampere per meter or 1,000 Gauss, nevertheless, this is a watch that probably exceeds its rating, as the timepiece features both the traditional soft iron cage, paramagnetic material to channel field lines around the hairspring, but it also features an anti-magnetic escapement and a niobium zirconium overcoil hairspring. Now, if you remember the IWC 500,000 ampere per meter, the reference 3508 Ingenieur of the 80s, that watch also used a niobium zirconium hairspring. So if this watch with that alloy and the soft iron cage is only Milgauss, I would be shocked and disappointed. I'm going to test one of these next to an MRI in the very near future. Stay tuned. A glorious three-hand no-date watch that is probably the perfect nexus of dress and sports styling cues. It has a close and fearsome rival at Omega from the same 1950s time frame that spawned the original Milgauss, the Railmaster. And this model, based on the 2017 Seamaster Railmaster, this is the 2018 Railmaster Blue Denim. Now, if you look at the dial, you can see it is extravagant in its own respect. It is a polychromatic, vertically striated satin. And if you look in there, you'll see everything from an electric blue to rival the Milgauss, to hues of gold and green and yellow and even lavender. It is an exceptional dial with immense nuance. And if you look at the indices themselves, you could see that they are actually solid blocks that are sunken into the dial, a la Panerai sandwich style, with a crosshair center and quarter Arabics. This is also a 40mm watch, but look at the contrast and style with the Rolex. All satin finished. It's discreet and in good taste. Now, of course, there is an outrageous denim jeans, blue denim jeans strap that you can buy for this watch if you want to go absolutely crazy. But this timepiece, as equipped on the bracelet, is the one to own. The most versatile, definitely the most durable, and the highest total value. I always say if you're going to buy a watch that's available on a strap or a bracelet, get it on the bracelet and then later buy the strap as an accessory. Far more expensive to do the opposite. And you can see on my 16cm circumference wrist, this watch, also a chronometer, also anti-magnetic by virtue of its silicone hairspring, with a 55-hour power reserve, one-upping the Rolex's 48. This watch is 150 meters to the Rolex's 100. Which do I choose between the two? Well, there's no doubt that the Omega is the better value. That said, you ask me which of the two I would buy with my own money, I would not hesitate to purchase the Rolex, simply because I like the Omega, I love the Z Blue. Okay, Rolex Detox, Omega Detox. Let's go outside the bounds of the big three and talk about a brand that just does everything right. With a new retail of $1,600, you cannot go wrong with this Oris Big Crown Pro Pilot featuring a gloss Bordeaux dial. Now, it is wonderfully lush, deep, and reflective. It almost appears as though it's crafted from enamel. Such is the gloss and the gleam of this extraordinary 1930s-inspired pilot-style dial. And there's a lot going on here. Let's work from the outside in. First, the case is 40 millimeters in stainless steel. There's a lovely vintage-inspired rounded and coined bezel. Turn over to the crown and you can see the namesake of the watch, the Big Crown. If you look at the lugs, you can see that the bezel's actually sunken down below the hoods of the lugs to make the watch thinner. And then you could see that although it is a sapphire, it has incredible thickness and camber to create that charming off-axis wobble or optical distortion that reminds us of vintage plexiglass. Railroad style, seconds and minutes outboard with a lunette style pointer date, a feature used on Oris watches since 1938 and a signature of the brand, with cathedral style 1930s aviator hands for minutes and hours. Turn it all over and you can see that it's a Sellita SW200, 38-hour power reserve, screw down crown, 50 meters water resistant, stop seconds and a quick set date, slightly upgraded over the standard 2824 on which it's based, one extra jewel, 26 versus 25 if you go with the Sellita version. And of course, Oris adjusting all these watches in-house. You can see there is a lovely suede overlay atop the thick-cut calfskin strap, and Oris does not short you the leather. As you can see how many layers are made up, and if you get close, you can see the layers and the contrasting stitch. 4 separate layers of leather. Throw it on the wrist and it explodes, just like the Milgauss does, because of the color and character of the dial, combined with a case that judiciously pairs vintage cues with modern fit, finish, and materials. Now, this watch is under 50 millimeters lug to lug, so I can still recommend it for a 14 centimeter circumference wrist, but you'll appreciate the wingspan of this one with judicious use of satin on top of the lugs and then polish on the flank of the case. A glorious watch, and again, $1,600 new, and even better value pre-owned. Let us go upscale. Let us go way upscale with a few unconventionals. These are all non-traditional luxury brands, at least in the realm of mechanical watchmaking. But with the purchase in 2000 of Gerald Genta and Daniel Roth, Bulgari properly became a high horology house, and it has come into its own with complications such as the one you see here. A 50-piece limited edition for 2019. This is the Octo Roma Tourbillon Sapphire, full media blasted octo case. You can see its many different facets, and in this case, the signature architecturally inspired faceted lugs are stepped out substantially from the case at all 4 corners with a channel between them. The case band, multiple layers of sapphire, allowing you to easily enjoy a lateral view of the BVL 206 movement. Now, rolling over to the dial side, you can see that there is a lot to recommend this watch. First, it is a true all-the-time watch. 50 meters water resistant and loomed. You can see it in the dark. The dial is both open worked, or I should say open wrought, and beautifully laden with colors: silver, satin and polished steel, rose gold, and that lovely metallic blue. At the base, you could see a tri-spoke flying tourbillon. Andrew, get as close as you can right here. The flying tourbillon carriage is entirely black polished, and note that the pivot stones on this movement, including the capstone of the tourbillon, are rendered in clear sapphire, corundum, just like the case, just like the crystal over the watch. It's a wonderful gossamer evanescent floating structure suspended in space, and you can see on the reverse side there is a ball-bearing pivot system underpinning the tourbillon, and a power reserve indicator tracing the 64-hour manually wound power reserve. You can see the train, you can see the open barrel, you can see the evacuated and satin-finished bridge and plate system underpinning a glorious manual wind caliper of incredible depth. But let's get real close now. I'm going to move the hands out of the way and show you the multifunction crown system on this watch. Now you can see that there is a red visible adjacent to the keyless works. I push the ceramic cabochon on the crown, and now you can see the indicator changes to black. Now I'm winding the watch. So I'm winding and energizing the timepiece. I press the cabochon one more time. There is a pawl and ratchet system So a pawl and ratchet wheel that changes the setting mode, and you can see the red for setting the time and the black for winding the watch. So it features a hand-finished multi-mode selector crown that prevents you from pulling the crown in and out and undermining the seals. It's a 44mm watch, and we're going to throw it on the wrist. This is one of the most exciting watches of the year, based on the 2017 Octo Tourbillon skeleton. This is perhaps a little bit more of our moment with the warm rose gold, the sapphire case, and the blue tones inside and out. You can see it's nicely constrained across the wrist, just over 50mm, and thus wearable on a smaller wrist. It's not a thin watch, it's not a dainty watch, but if you're in the market for a watch like this, you don't want it to vanish. Beaten away at 21.6 on the wrist, turn it all over, you can see that the strap is of excellent quality with an electric blue to rival the dial of the Z Blue. You can see that's almost the same blue. The strap and the dial of the Milgauss. I'm loving this Bulgari. All hand-finished parts internally. All hand-finished case components. This is craft horology of the finest degree, and it's made in the Vallée du Jeu, not far from great houses like Audemars Piguet, Blancpain, and Jaeger-LeCoultre. Speaking of high horology houses, let's go hyper-traditional with one of the oldest maisons in continuous operation in Switzerland, Vacheron Constantin. Established in 1755, still operating out of Geneva, the model you see here was launched in 2010. Now, originally, this was the Patrimoine Traditionnel chronograph. I call it reference 49192 because the reference has not changed. 42mm in white gold with white gold hands. Note that the Dauphine style hands are half frosted, half polished to make for contrast on the satin finished opaline silver dial with multiple different metallic silvers. You could see the sub-registers and that lovely concentric brushing. Applique white gold indices. The watch features an extraordinarily contoured case with strong lug profiles. You can see this is not a weak or wan Calatrava blended lug profile. This is Vacheron's own shape, and great lug design has been a Vacheron hallmark throughout history. Based on the Lemania 2310, Patek would call this the CH 2770. Vacheron calls it the 1141. It is a true lateral clutch column wheel chronograph of the highest grade. Manual wind, 18,000 vibrations per hour. You can see the end of that dog leg of the Breguet overcoil kicking out from underneath the regulator. There's actually a wire between the half bridge and the bridge for the escape wheel, and that wire is a hairspring guard for the overcoil. I've seen these in vintage chronographs. Vacheron is the only one I know of that does this in modern watches for shock resistance. Beaten away at 18,000, 48-hour manual wind power reserve, lateral clutch, and you can see everything from the black polished crenellated tower and center screw of the column wheel to the satin finished steel levers and hooks of the clutch system, as well as the bridge gloriously hand finished for the minute jumper. Now let's stop the chronograph and reset. You can see the heart cams being recentered by the hammers. This is a beautiful watch of modern dimensions and proportions. 42mm is an excellent size for a modern men's dress complication, so this one is not petite, nor is it oversized, but at 42 it has a full, flat, broad presence with a pleasing aspect ratio that makes it look even thinner than it is. A gloriously traditional chrono, and if you can't get the Lemania base in Patek Philippe anymore, know that it lives on in grand fashion in the back catalog of both Patek and Vacheron. And speaking of Patek, 2 years ago, Patek gave us, and by 2 years ago, I mean 2 Basels ago, properly was 2018, the Pilot's Watch, Calatrava Travel Time. This is the 5524R. Now, the watch is extraordinary because unlike the matte dial of the standard white gold model, this one features a gradient sunburst, so it's almost brown bronze at its center and black at its outer edge. Rose gold hands, rose gold applique Arabic numerals, and you can see that it's a smart design that allows you to hide the second time zone when you don't need it. But when you do, you can easily use the adjusters on the flank to quickly set 2 time zones. Now, there is a pointer date down at 6 o'clock. There is a center seconds, and there are local and home or reference time AM PM indicators. This is a smart system as there's a quarter turn lock for both of the travel time crowns. So if you don't want to actuate the system by accident, you lock them. The watch, 60 meters water resistant, is far more water resistant than a standard Calatrava. 30 meters is standard. This is 60. You can swim with this watch. Now throw it on the wrist and you can see 42 is a large watch by Patek standards. But like the Vacheron, it has a broad flat presence and my 16 centimeter wrist wears it well. It's a lovely timepiece with none of the voguish aftermarket markups of the steel sports watches, so it's everything you would get in a travel time Aquanaut with perhaps a more enduring long-term value when purchased pre-owned. And of course you get the impeccable Patek Philippe finish, and this is a Patek Philippe seal movement with the Gyromax free-sprung architecture, the 6-position adjustment, and the Spiromax silicone hairspring. So this watch has guaranteed precision from the factory of no worse than -3 + 2 seconds per day. So not just a more versatile Calatrava, but also a more accurate watch and a lovely dial. You can see that gradient sunburst so well from this angle. Now let's jump back to the accessible realm. Some folks say that the Planet Ocean is just too thick, and I tend to agree. But if you go back just a few years, they were a bit more manageable. At just over 15 millimeters thick, this is the Planet Ocean between the time the caliber 8500s arrived, but just prior to the arrival of the ceramic bezels. It's a slimmer watch, and you can see not as disastrously thick as some of the later models. It's also blessed with the lovely full anodized aluminum orange bezel that was distinctive of these earlier Planet Oceans and later lost with the ceramic bezels. So I love the look of this watch, from the matte black of the dial to its white gold hands and indices. It's designed to be an upscale and practical flagship diver for the Omega catalog. Now, the bezel has a nice chunky and positive detent. I'm going to the mic on this one because bezel feel and sound truly can make or break a dive watch, and this one, fortunately, is a made man. It feels good, it sounds good, it's precise, and it is 120 click. Now you also have a fold-out dive extension built into the clasp, so you have that all-or-nothing extension for throwing it over a wetsuit, a dry suit, or even a thick winter coat. The clasp, as ever with the modern Seamaster Professionals, solid milled twin-trigger release with machined swing arms, very secure. And unlike the earliest Planet Oceans, which did not feature display casebacks, you can see that coaxial chronometer, silicone hairspring, 60-hour power reserve, caliber 8500 at work. Throw it on the wrist and you can see why I recommend this older generation of Planet Ocean. This stainless steel watch is a 42 millimeter, which makes it highly wearable, even on a smaller wrist. No, it's not a thin watch, and it's certainly not the thinnest diver in Omega's own catalog. Even today, the Seamaster Diver 300 meter is slimmer, but it is a more wearable and more agreeable Planet Ocean shape, color, and size, and for me, that makes this one a winner. At around $3,000 pre-owned, it's also a great deal for a modern Omega diver. Okay, speaking of Omega, Omega is willing to innovate, because I can tell you, Rolex would never sell a watch on the internet in honor of a website, doubling up the online quotient. This is the Speedy Tuesday 1. Now, the Speedy Tuesday 1, a lovely tribute to 5 years of the Speedy Tuesday on Fratello watches, one of the most read watch columns on the entire net. This is a watch that's also a tribute to the Project Alaska 3, which was developed during the mid-70s and deployed with NASA during the late 70s into the 90s. Now, the Alaska 3 featured a distinctive combination of an all-matte or satin-finished case and registers that featured radial numerals rather than the conventional hash marks and broken numeral array. So you have the radial design, you have the full matte case, but if you look, you could see that it does not have the monotone registers of the original Alaska 3. Instead, you have contrasting dished registers with a sort of concentric pattern internally, and that's because this watch has a loom shot for the ages, with not just the dial and the hands, but the full registers themselves fully loomed. Also note the vintage Omega script, applique Omega logo, Speedmaster script, and of course, if you turn it all over on its side, there's also a vintage Omega logo on the crown, and a dedication to both Project Alaska and Speedy Tuesday on the reverse side of this limited edition of 2012 pieces. 2012, the first year of the Speedy Tuesday column. And if you look closely, you can see the word radial arrayed appropriately radially around the circumference of the caseback. A handsome Moonwatch powered 42 millimeter Moonwatch, basically a caliber 1861. It's the Moonwatch caliber that still flies, and this watch features a traditional Hesalite, so it has the same plexiglass, or I should say thermoplastic, that you would find on a traditional Moonwatch, so you get that same distortion proportion with a lovely folded and contrasting stitch aviator-style calfskin strap, a lovely ode to a modern tradition in the watch collecting fraternity. I love that Omega honored a website, and I love that these found their way directly to collectors, essentially, through the online vending process. So it wasn't possible for speculators to get them at dealers, mark them up, and sell them as used watches immediately. First come, first served. That's a good system. Now, let's talk about the other Sinn, because I promised you another Sinn. On the table tonight, my second favorite Sinn watch, the Hunter's Chronograph 3006. This was launched alongside the EZM 11 back in 2017, and it's an all-timer. You can see a full satin-finished 44mm tegmented steel case. The tegament makes the surface of the steel up to 1200 Vickers hard, which is comparable to the surface of a ceramic watch. Now you can see the dial is lovely dished and matte finished with applique solid blocks of Luminova, fully loomed hands, and this is known as the Hunter's Chronograph because it gives you a read on the moon phase. In Germany, you are not allowed to hunt at night using artificial light, so you need a full moon or close to it, and that's what Sinn gives you. You have a moon phase indicator with a lovely little symbolic plinth underneath, and that moon phase is itself fully loomed so you can see it at night. If you look at the dished layering of the dial, you can see the flange overhangs the dial, and then you have subregisters for multiple complications. You have chronograph minutes, constant seconds, and you have chronograph hours, but you also have the day, the month, and a radial date indicator, and Sinn is smart because you also have a 24-hour indicator, so you know if it's day or night if you are that cooped up inside. Sinn doing something every company using a pusher adjuster should do. They give you a pusher adjuster on the flank so you can adjust the day. Now this is brilliant because it eliminates the need for a pusher tool, but you can also see that it is a German language calendar. So if you are into the watch brand from Frankfurt, this is a way to get deeply into the culture of Sinn and a little piece of Germany on your wrist, truly, because of the unique circumstances of German hunting laws. 200-meter water resistant, and they still give you a display case back. And in case you're wondering, this is a top grade Valjoux 7751, adjusted in-house by Sinn. Nicely executed and handsome. It's worth looking at, and it's worth the display case back. The Jagduhr, the Hunter's Chronograph, born on a lovely and surprisingly buttery, multi-layer, sheer-cut calfskin strap. This feels as though it's been broken in, even though it is brand new. It is a wonderful watch in so many respects, and at 44 millimeters, I advise you not be intimidated. I can wear it on a 16-centimeter circumference wrist, and this is a lovely timepiece for a smaller wrist because of the shape of the lugs. If you like the big watch look, but you want medium-sized watch fit, this one's going to answer the call. It also features the AR dehumidifying system. Now, though it is nicknamed AR after the original use of argon when this system first bowed in the 90s, today you use a nitrogen fill inside the case to evacuate all moisture, and then a copper sulfate capsule in the flank that can be replaced during service that pulls out any moisture that might accumulate inside this watch. Finally, because it's just a ton of fun, there is a screw-down crown system with a quick set for both the calendar and the moon phase. If we can go back to the dial, you can see I can quick set the calendar, but also the moon phase. And it is just a lot of fun to play with these subsidiary features. I adore this watch. I seriously considered buying this 3006 alongside my EZM 11. That might be the second Sinn in my collection. All right, moving on to something that is quite simply larger than life. If you remember the Platinum AP from the last episode, well, that full Platinum Royal Oak Offshore placed next to this Maitre du Temps would probably combine with enough mass to create a singularity and absorb the show. So that's why I don't have both on the table tonight. That would be a reputational risk for the company, as well as an existential risk for the studio. But you can see that this Chapter 2, part of a series launched in 2009, has it all. Rollers that are lovely in lacquer for the day as well as the month. There is a double-digit date, an extraordinary guilloche blue dial with a black hour track, and you can see the case in white gold, 42 millimeters wide, 58 millimeters lug-to-lug, and 18 millimeters thick. It blows me away that there are wrists built for this watch, but if you've got that wrist, I've got your watch. If you feel like you just can't get a big enough watch, everything looks dainty, every 42 and 43 looks like a quarter strapped to your wrist, this is your complication, and its pedigree is impeccable. Maitre du Temps, created by Stephen Holtzman, a lifetime watch industry exec, combines several master watchmakers for each chapter of its model line. So this is the chapter 2, combining Daniel Roth, or Daniel Roth, as we call him everywhere else, Roger Dubuis, and Peter Speake-Marin. So the three of them involved in the creation of this watch. And if you look at the case back, it's as handsome and accomplished on the reverse side. You could see the gloriously engraved rose gold rotor with the motto of the company, Masters and Their Craft, a lifelong pursuit of excellence. Automatic winding, this is the SCH-01 50-hour power reserve and immaculately hand-finished. You can also see that there are push-button adjusters for the calendar on the reverse side, as well as second sapphire viewports, so you can see the rollers from the underside. Now, what I can do when I turn it over is demonstrate how these systems work. Now, Andrew, up a little bit. There is a push button that allows you to easily and quickly index the calendar rollers, and those rollers are the distinctive styling feature of every Maitre du Temps timepiece. This one's over the top, and they are very exclusive, with only a few dozen of each model being made per year. Also, I should mention, if you're wondering how you adjust the date, just like this. There's a pusher adjuster on the flank of the case that allows you to adjust the double-digit date, and quickly. All right, that is a monster. But for every beast, there must be a beauty. And if your sports watch inclinations trend toward the more classical, time-tested, and slender, then this Patek Philippe Nautilus Annual Calendar 5726A is for you. I'm showing you the watch because this is the most versatile version of the watch on the strap. What appears at first glance to be a leather strap is in fact a rubber strap that even features the color coding top and bottom of the leather unit. 120 meters water resistant. It's a lovely watch. The horizontal striations of the dial featuring a gray gradient, a little bit like the Nautilus 5711, but rather than blue, you have a dial that fades from almost silver at its center to black at its edge. White gold hands, white gold indices, a lovely aperture-style calendar for the day, the month, as well as the date. You need only adjust this watch once a year, the jump from February to March, 40.5 millimeters in stainless steel, and you can see on the back, it is a Patek 324 base, the same base movement that's used in the Calatrava Travel Time, and the same standard of finish with Patek Philippe seal, Gyromax balance, precision guarantee, and silicone hairspring. Throw it on the wrist, and I'll be honest, I think the Nautilus is overhyped. I think secondary market values are too high. I think there's going to be a correction. But I can see the core appeal of the watch, as it's easy to wear on any wrist, handsome, versatile, with automatic winding, a fully loomed dial, an everyday friendly complication, and 120 meter water resistance. You need not ever remove this watch. And if you're a lady who's into high horology, you're probably going to find that quite a few men's watches are more appealing than the predominantly quartz, undersized, and gem-studded fare of the Swiss offerings. And frankly, a lot of the women I know who are into high-end watches are into men's watches that will fit on a more petite wrist. And this watch will also suit that particular predilection. A lovely timepiece that's absolutely a pleasure. Would I pay $100,000 for one? Probably not. But on a strap, it's not quite going to cost that much. And frankly, I think that while the bubble for these watches is for now, the appeal of them, the classic timeless immunity to obsolescence, that's forever. Now, let's jump into a very different kind of timepiece. One that is also a sportster, but rather than overrated, this one is underrated. This came out in 1998, the Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso Grand Sport, and it was immediately regarded as one of the top watches of the year, returning the Reverso, which was originally conceived as a sports watch for polo players. This returned the Reverso to its role as a sports standard bearer in the Jaeger-LeCoultre collection, and the Reverso Grand Sport was the first ever automatic Reverso. Automatic winding, it still features the same solid caseback of the original 1931 Reverso. Back then, the idea was to prevent the crystal from being smashed by polo mallets during a game. Today, it acts as a platform for alternately befuddling your friends as they wonder what's on your wrist, or, if you wish, lacquer, enamel, or engraving to personalize the watch. While confounding your friends, you can get them into watches because the case feels wonderfully precise, like the bolt of a high-end rifle. There's a snick and a snap here that belies the age of the timepiece, as it still feels as crisp as the day it left the Valet de Jeu. Now 27 millimeters wide, about 10 millimeters thick, and from lug to lug just over 43 millimeters. It's an easy watch to wear on a smaller wrist. The bracelet is brilliant, frankly, because not only is it a quadruple trigger release. Now, it's not a bracelet, of course, it's a clasp on a strap, but the clasp is brilliant because it's a quadruple trigger release, so you need to disengage all 4 triggers to open this up. There is a spring-loaded block with these little individual extensions that are retractable and spring-loaded. Then finally, you have a quick adjustment system with a push button on both sides. On each side of the clasp, you have that push button micro adjustment. So you have 2 micro adjustments built into the clasp. Throw it on the wrist and you realize that anyone can wear this watch. Another one of our unisex options, 43.5 millimeters lug to lug, means that this is a watch anyone can wear. It's elegant, it's handsome, it's fully loomed, and at 50 meters water resistant, substantially more water resistant than a standard Reverso, which is 20 to 30 meters. So this is surface swimmable. You can see the distinctive lug pattern, the junction of the strap with the lug profile that is unique to the Grand Sport series. You'll also note that while it is a traditional rectangular case Reverso, this is not like the later Squadras. It has a little bit of a root beer barrel profile. That's what I think of when I see it. I think of those candy root beer barrels that we all enjoyed as a kid. It's a bit more rotund than a standard Reverso, but it has its own look, feel, and sporty ambiance. And a JLC movement inside. Now let me show you one last feature that I love here, but it's the fact that you have center seconds on a Reverso. A sports watch should have center seconds. Automatic winding, swimmable, stainless steel, center seconds, a hacking system, and a quick set date. This watch is all you need, and it gets you in the door into the realm of high horology for under $5,000. Now, some folks do have a taste for the eccentric, and for them, an offbeat Reverso simply doesn't go far enough, or I should say, too far enough. That said, Parmigiani Fleurier has your number with this stainless steel lilac dial Kalpa XL Hebdomadaire, a timepiece with an extravagant dial, and you can see multiple different types of guilloche in lush metallic lavender with applique white gold indices, Delta style fully loomed hands, and you'll also note the stylized Art Nouveau Arabic numerals employed on this dial. Now, the case itself, the Kalpa case, features a break between the case and the ergonomic elements. So while you can see the case itself, which contains the dial and the movement, is more or less bored flat, the lugs themselves curve around the wrist and they serve as the ergonomic element that grips and wraps around your wrist to make the watch fit and look perfect even on a smaller forearm. Throw it on the wrist, and you can see, though it's big, it doesn't overpower like the Maitre du Temps Chapter 2 did. This watch is 53 millimeters lug to lug, but again, the lugs wrap around your wrist, and you can see that to good effect, that the watch does curve down rather than project outward arrogantly and awkwardly. It's only 11.5 millimeters thick, and across the case, 37 millimeters. So this is a large watch that wears small. It's the ultimate ergonomic equation. You make a statement, and at the same time, it doesn't overwhelm your wrist. So the timepiece is immaculately hand-finished inside. Parmigiani Fleurier caliber PF110, manual wind, 8-day power reserve, overcoil hairspring. You have the power reserve indicator on the dial side as well as a quick set date, and it beats away at 28,800 vibrations per hour, so there is no loss of a modern beat rate. It's adjusted in 5 positions like a chronometer, and you could see that the 8-day power reserve, by virtue of multiple barrels, is provided by a movement that is simply stunning. Now, get as close as you can, Andrew, and I'm going to shout out some of the features here. There is a black polished swan's neck regulator. Every bridge, and you can begin to see the edge of the bridge as I tilt it through the light, every bridge, jewel sync and screw sync, is black polished with mirrored anglage. This is not a machined bevel. Now, you'll also appreciate, as I turn the watch at an angle, that these are the crested Côte de Genève, of which I've often spoken. Dark on one side, light on the other. That is real abrasive wheel Côte de Genève. And finally, well, there's actually a couple of different things to shout out. We're not there yet, but this would be the ultimate coup de grace, if you will. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 interior angles. That is the sharp cleft between 2 planes of a bridge where they meet. Interior angles, often missing even on Geneva Hallmark calibers. Here, you get 8 of them. from Parmigiani Fleurier. Now finally, note the micro perlage on the base plate as well as the black polish of the screws and their chamfered slots. High horology that lives up to the legend. This is not high horology as you often encounter it in conservatively finished Swiss movements. This is high horology as you dream of it, brought to reality by the mind of a madman, Michel Parmigiani. Note that the caliber was also shaped and sized for the case, and Parmigiani making every part of the watch except for their straps. Now, jumping really quick to something that is completely different, I think it's appropriate that we acknowledge the simplicity of the monotone GMT, the late great 116710LN. This is a watch that is already gaining additional notoriety and accruing collector interest as it was discontinued this year. So with the combination of the black bezel, the green GMT hand and GMT script on the dial, as well as the oyster bracelet, this is now not a rarity, but increasingly sought with more competition for good examples as it's been phased out, and it is understatement perhaps taken to the nth degree. It looks almost like a sub at first glance. You could miss that this is a GMT, but it has all the functionality. It has the dual time movement. It has the bidirectional rotating ceramic capped GMT bezel, 40 millimeters with a super case. It's wearable on almost any wrist, though as with the sub no date last week when we discussed the super cases, this does look more like a 42 once it's on the wrist. You could see that due to the shear of the side, which is substantial, as well as the blockish squared off ends of the lugs. 48-hour power reserve, COSC chronometer, and Rolex superlative chronometer, all this 100 meters water resistant. If I were to pick from the GMT stock available in recent production, this would probably be my pick. If I didn't have to pay, I would have trouble choosing between this and the Blue Dial White Gold Pepsi. They're both lovely, but this watch is both more accessible and more understated, and I tend to gravitate towards that sensibility. A lovely, late discontinued, and recently collector, shall we say, collector highlighted, collector sought, collector identified future prospect for not appreciation, but shall we say, greater interest. I never want to call a watch an investment, but this is certainly one that's catching more eyebrows today than it did 12 months ago, and all of that is down to it being discontinued. Let's see, what else have we here? How about another watch that bowed only a year ago, with a very different take on the long-running 2006 to present Patek Philippe annual calendar flyback chronograph 5960. Now this is the 5960 in white gold. It is technically the 5960/01G. It was not the first 5160G. That was actually a Moscow boutique special edition for the Russian market, but this is a lovely watch that combines elements of the white gold 5524G with the 5960. So you can see there is a flyback chronograph. You can reset and restart with a single push of the trigger, fully loomed, automatic winding. There's a mono counter down at 6 o'clock that gives you hours as well as minutes. You can see the hands for the two are superimposed. There's also an AM/PM indicator just below the hands that lets you know whether you're looking at night and day, so you know when not to attempt to correct the annual calendar. Day, date, and month, and they need be corrected only once a year during the jump from February to March. I actually prefer this to the Nautilus. It's just a bit more my style. The red, white, and blue dial works with any number of national flags, from Korea to Russia, the United States, and everything in between. Of course, it is the matte finish of this dial that endears it to me with that pebbly grain. It also creates the comparisons, the natural comparisons, to the 5524G. Now throw it on its opposite side, and you can see that this caliber 28520, a Patek Philippe in-house automatic, features all of the toys with a power reserve of up to 55 hours automatic winding. And note the different types of perlage. There's a macro perlage on the base plate, and then in spiral format there's a micro perlage on the center of the rotor. Ceramic bearings, silicone hairspring, 6-position adjustment, free sprung, and of course that precision guarantee of -3 +2 per day. White gold, it's a watch that's 40.5 millimeters, so large by Patek Philippe standards, though not large by complication standards, and it's wonderful because of its shape, and you can really see the lugs do arc around the wrist. Not quite as extreme as the Kalpa, but this watch has more of an ergonomic fit to it than almost anything else on the table, not because of its size, but because of its shape, and I really can't overemphasize that curved lugs are as important as narrow lugs for a smaller wrist like mine. Plus, let me show you some of the other features that recall the 5524G here. You can see the counterweighted vintage-inspired Clevis-style pin buckle, as well as the aviator-style calfskin strap with crosshatch stitching. This really does feel almost like a 5960 pilot's watch. Okay, we are nearing the end of our program, but we're going to finish with a bang, starting with the 2018 70th anniversary Seamaster. This is the Seamaster 1948 limited edition of 1,948 pieces, 38 millimeters, stainless steel, and as you can see, designed to evoke the 1948 Omega Seamaster reference CK2577, the first Seamaster. There was a version with center seconds and a version with small seconds. This is the center. The center seconds version of the watch is a bit more versatile because it features lume, whereas the small seconds version of this watch does not. And although it does feature a sapphire crystal, if you can get very close to the center, you can still see the vintage-inspired Omega logo engraved into the very center of the crystal. Now, you'll appreciate the fact that the watch with a display case back lets you see that for which you've paid, caliber 8806 coaxial Maytag chronometer. So it is anti-magnetic, it is a chronometer, it has a 55-hour power reserve, and as you can see, it features other notable high-tech machinery from 1948, including the British Gloucester Meteor fighter aircraft and a Chris Craft launch. Stainless steel, 60 meters water resistant, so swimmable, though not a hardcore dive watch. It continues in the tradition of the original, which was a highly water resistant dress watch, the 70th anniversary limited edition Seamaster for 2018. Now, we continue to escalate with a sensational Jaeger-LeCoultre Duomètre. This is the Duomètre A Quantième Lunaire Grand Faux, a 200-piece limited edition in white gold. You can see that this 40.5 millimeter white gold case features a Jaeger-LeCoultre in-house Grand Faux enamel dial. So fired up to 20 times at 800 degrees centigrade, JLC makes everything. They make their own gray gold, that is homogeneous mix, non-plated white gold case. They make that. They make the caliber 381 on the inside, and they make their own vitreous enamel dial. All of that with two power reserves. Power reserve for the balance, power reserve for the time of day and the complications. There is a simple system for rapidly adjusting the calendar, and you can see there is also a moon phase, lovely and lush within. You can see that there is a foudroyant for the 1/6 of a second measurement, and because the watch features the ultimate zero reset system, you'll watch as I pull the crown for setting, I stop the foudroyant, and then I reset the center seconds. All of that powered by a heart cam and hammer system, much like the reset on a traditional chronograph. Twin mainspring barrels, each one with 50-hour power reserve. They're wound by turning the crown in opposite directions, and you can see that the two different movements in one case, two trains, two power sources, and they meet at a single anchor that turns one off, turns the other on. Off, on, off, on, off, on, alternating, acting like a traffic cop for the two movements, with German silver bridges, that is nickel, copper, zinc, for that golden hue brought about by the copper. They call it Maillot in the Swiss watchmaking regions, not German silver. Free sprung balance beaten away at 21.6, and of course all of that powering a sensational watch that wears far more easily, I should mention, than the original 42mm Duomètre. It also features a domed bezel rather than the original conical bezel on the 2007 Duomètre, so the watch appears more elegant as well as more wearable, and on my 16cm circumference wrist, this would be the size I would buy for myself. I've owned the 42, my next Duomètre would be the 40.5. Oh, right. What could top that? Realistically, not much, but there is one company out of Saxony that probably holds the record for closers on this show, and that is A. Lange & Söhne. And in 2016, they launched the Richard Lange Jumping Seconds, 39.5 millimeters in platinum with a solid sterling silver dial. This is a 100-piece limited edition featuring 4 key refinements. 1. Jumping seconds. Not a Venn diagram, but a Seifert scale with the 3 overlapping scales. You also have a power reserve indicator that shows you when you are down to your last 10 hours of power reserve. Now, it's a manual wind watch, and it has a 42-hour power reserve overall. And when you have more than 10 hours of power reserve stored up, that is when the watch removes the triangular red power reserve warning. And I'm winding it backwards, which is actually more difficult than you might think. Let me just wind it correctly. And there you can see the transition. I wind faster. You can see the transition away from the red 10-hour warning. Now there's another refinement here. Like the Jaeger LeCoultre, there is a zero reset system, so you can set the watch precisely to a reference time. And finally, when you turn the watch over, you realize that there is also a remontoire d'égalité, or a constant force device. Just as you'd find on the Zeitwerk, it uses a hairspring rather than the straight blade of F.P. Journe's system. You can see the deadbeat second mechanism at center. You can also see the balance beating away. It features an overcoil hairspring and a freehand engraved half bridge for the balance with black polished swan's neck regulator, glasuta stripes, not Cote de Genève, both black polished and fire blued screws, jewels set in screw fixed chaton a la pocket watch, mirrored anglage on the edge of every bridge, and as you could see, this is as good as it gets. I've got nothing on the table that can top this watch, right down to the evacuated three-quarter style pocket watch inspired bridge and the window into the hairspring-based constant force device. This is a watch dedicated to the memory of Richard Lange, a watchmaker and a scientist from the Lange dynasty of glasuta. This is a watch that wears a treat on my wrist with incredible mass thanks to the platinum case, 39.5 millimeters, and the silver dial. Only 11.4 millimeters thick and 47.8 millimeters lug to lug. Any wrist can pull off this mammoth of engineering. And though it's a mammoth, it's not a big bully on the wrist. The universal watch for connoisseurs of high horology. Whew. Are you awake yet? I hope so. Thanks, guys, for making our second edition of Wake Up with Watches a success. Thanks to you, thanks to my crew, especially Andrew on the macro camera. He's the ace. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.